The GCI operator at Qatam Al-Anbiya Air Defense Command had been watching the contact for 4 minutes and 17 seconds before he called it in. A single track, bearing 247, altitude inconsistent, speed inconsistent. Something was wrong with the return. It flickered, disappeared, reappeared 8 kilometers from where its trajectory should have placed it. Not a bird, not weather clutter. The contact was too deliberate, too directional, and too purposeful in the way it refused to hold still on his scope. He picked up the phone. At Shahid Vatanpur Air Base in Tabriz, 6 F-4E Phantom 2s were sitting at 15-minute alert. The scramble order came through at 03:17 local time. 6 aircraft, full weapons load. The pilots had been briefed on this exact intrusion pattern 3 days prior, a persistent corridor violation in the northwest that American intelligence collection assets had been quietly exploiting for weeks. Tonight, Iran's commanders had decided, was the night that ended. 6 aircraft against 1 contact. The math seemed overwhelming and obvious. It was the last obvious thing about this engagement. Everyone watching this scramble from a radar room sees the same picture. 6 fighters, 1 contact. An ambush prepared in Iranian sovereign airspace with home field advantage, ground radar support, and numeric superiority so complete it should not be a fight at all. This is how you kill a lone intruder. You mass force. You cut off every exit vector. You saturate the geometry with aircraft until there is no escape angle left to exploit. This is sound military logic. It has worked for 70 years of aerial warfare. They are wrong to apply it here. Not wrong in the details, wrong in the foundational premise of what this engagement actually is. The 6 F-4 pilots climbing hard into the northwest corridor are not setting an ambush. They are walking into one. They cannot see it yet because the aircraft they are hunting has been tracking all 6 of them since before the first Phantom rolled out of its hardened shelter. The number advantage, 6-1, only matters in a world where both sides can see each other. This engagement stopped being that kind of world the moment the F-35 crossed into Iranian airspace 40 minutes earlier. What looks like a coordinated trap is actually a test, and the F-35 already knows every answer before the questions are asked. Here's the question this engagement forces every serious air power analyst to confront. Can sheer numbers overwhelm a 5th-generation fighter? Can 6 aircraft carrying weapons, active radar, and lethal orders close the gap that 2 full generations of aerospace engineering deliberately created between them? We are going to wargame this in complete detail. Physics, geometry, weapons, envelopes, electronic warfare. Every step of what happens when 6 Cold War airframes attempt to ambush the most informationally dominant combat aircraft currently flying. Drop the keyword Phantom in the comments right now. Let's build the math together. 3 physical realities define every second of this engagement. Ignore any single one of them, and the outcome stops making sense. First, radar cross-section. The F-4E Phantom presents approximately 6 square meters of radar cross-section to a head-on search beam. A return so large and consistent that the AN/APQ-120 fire control radar installed in an opposing aircraft can detect it from over 80 kilometers under standard atmospheric conditions. The F-35's frontal radar cross-section is 0.0015 square meters, not 6, not 1, 0.0015. That is roughly the electromagnetic footprint of a metal golf ball suspended at altitude. Against the pulse Doppler radar aboard Iran's F-4s, the F-35 does not appear as a small contact. It does not appear as a degraded contact. It does not appear at all until the geometry between the 2 aircraft collapses to a range where appearing no longer matters to the outcome. Second, detection range asymmetry. The F-35's AN/APG-81 AES, a fire control radar, detects a 1 square meter target at 150 kilometers and simultaneously manages 23 separate track files. The 6 Phantoms, each presenting 6 square meters of cross-section to that beam, are visible to the F-35 from a range that makes the F-4's own radar not just inferior, but operationally irrelevant. The engagement is decided informationally before it begins kinetically. That sentence is not rhetorical emphasis. It is a statement of geometry. Third, the weapons envelope gap. The AIM-120D AMRAAM, carried internally in the F-35's weapons bay, has a kinematic range exceeding 160 kilometers and a no-escape zone that extends past 100 kilometers. Iran's upgraded F-4s carry the R-73 infrared-guided missile, Russian origin, 30-kilometer maximum effective range, and variants of the AIM-9 Sidewinder family at comparable distances. The distance between where the F-35 can achieve a kill and where any weapon the F-4 carries can reach is not a tactical disadvantage. It is a categorical problem with no solution available to the F-4 crew. Strip this engagement to its structural architecture and you get 3 layers. Every pilot in this fight lives or dies entirely within one of them. The F-35's Integrated Sensor Suite, AN/A-PG-81 AESA radar, distributed aperture system running 6 infrared cameras in spherical 360-degree coverage simultaneously, electro-optical targeting system, and AN/ASQ-239 electronic warfare suite, does not function as separate instruments requiring the pilot to synthesize information. It fuses into one continuously updated operational picture. 6 F-4s, 6 radar signatures, 6 heat sources, 6 weapons quality firing solutions. The Ghost, the F-35's 0.001 5 square meter frontal cross-section means the AN/APQ-120 radars sweeping forward from all 6 Phantoms are passing through the exact airspace the F-35 occupies and returning nothing. Not a degraded contact, not a noise floor blip, nothing. The F-35 is not hiding from the F-4s. It is invisible to them by the laws of physics governing electromagnetic reflection. There is no technique the Phantom crew can apply to change that outcome. It is not a training gap. It is a wavelength gap. The long-arm 4 AIM-120D missiles sitting in the F-35's internal bay, 160 kilometers of kinematic reach each, Mach 4 terminal velocity. The F-35 can put all 4 weapons in the air against 4 separate targets before the first Phantom radar has completed enough sweeps to register that anything is happening. The eye sees everything. The Ghost is seen by nothing. The long arm reaches a distance the F-4 cannot imagine defending. At 0317, 6 Phantoms climb out of debris on a heading vectored by the GCI network. Ground radar has the contact at 140 kilometers northwest. The formation pushes throttles forward and begins the intercept in standard spread. 6 aircraft fanning across 22 kilometers of sky, a net designed to cut off lateral escape and compress the intruder into a kill box where numbers finally matter. It is textbook intercept geometry. It works against every conventional aircraft in Iran's threat library. It is about to encounter the one aircraft it was never designed to stop. The F-35 pilot has had all 6 contacts on his display for 11 minutes. The distributed aperture system flagged their engine heat signatures the moment the first Phantom rolled out of its hardened shelter. The APG-81 confirmed track classifications within 40 seconds of initial detection. The F-35 pilot knows the formation spacing, the altitude of each aircraft, the fuel states implied by their power settings, the precise vector of every pilot in the package. He adjusts his own altitude to optimize the AIM-120D's kinematic envelope for the geometry ahead. He watches them close. He waits. At 93 kilometers, the lead Phantom's AN/APQ-120 sweeps forward, searching for a return. A 1 square meter target would sit at the very edge of that radar's detection capability. The F-35 presents 0.0015 square meters. The scope returns nothing. The GCI controller has a bearing from his ground radar, but cannot hand the formation a weapons quality track. He orders the 6 aircraft to continue closure. They push forward into airspace the F-35 is already controlling. At 78 kilometers, the F-4s go to full military power. 6 radar transmitters, 6 IFF interrogators, 6 radar altimeters, all active simultaneously, all broadcasting into the electromagnetic spectrum in every direction. The AN/ASQ-239 records every frequency, every pulse repetition interval, every data link signature in real time. Each Phantom is no longer just a radar target. It is a fully cataloged electronic identity. Every emission characteristic logged, processed, and ready to exploit at the precise moment the engagement turns kinetic. They thought the net was closing around the intruder. The F-35 was writing their electronic obituaries. At 55 kilometers, the first 2 AIM-120DS leave the F-35's internal weapons bay. No radar emission spike on launch. No detectable acoustic or electromagnetic signature that any sensor aboard the 6 F-4s can measure. The missiles accelerate to Mach 4, climbing on a lofted ballistic arc, their own active radar seekers cold and passive in their terminal guidance phase. From the 6 F-4 crew's perspective, the sky ahead is still completely clean. Radar warning receivers are silent. Scopes show nothing. The GCI controller is calling 50 kilometers to contact. The pilots push harder. Then the lead Phantom's radar warning receiver erupts. Active radar seeker, inbound. The bearing is impossible. Forward quarter. At a range, their own radar never registered anything. The pilot brakes hard right, dumps chaff, pulls maximum G into a defensive turn that costs him 200 knots of airspeed and 4,000 feet of altitude he will not recover in this engagement. His wingman is already in his own brake, turning the opposite direction. The formation, the net, the trap, the intercept geometry Iran's planners spent 3 days constructing, dissolves in 6 seconds into 6 separate aircraft, each making individual survival calculations with no coordination possible between them. The GCI controller is transmitting continuously over the radio, trying to re-establish formation order. He cannot. The engagement has accelerated past the speed at which ground-based direction carries any operational value. The battle has already moved into a dimension his radar cannot map. For the 4 Phantom pilots still pressing forward, the next several seconds are a study in disorientation. Their training was built around the assumption that an enemy they could not see on radar was an enemy far away. The F-35 has inverted that logic completely. The threat they cannot see on radar is the closest and most lethal thing in their sky. Every instrument they carry tells them nothing is there. Every instinct developed across decades of training tells them to find the threat, close on it, and engage. Their instruments are telling the truth, and their instincts are going to get them killed. 2 more AIM-120DS leave the F-35's bay, targeting the second element. The defensive brake maneuvers of the first pair did not alter the firing geometry on the second element at all. The missiles know exactly where to go. At 28 kilometers, through the chaos of chaff clouds and desperate maneuvering, 2 surviving Phantom pilots finally get intermittent radar returns on the F-35, not a weapons-quality track. A suggestion. A ghost contact that appears for 2 antenna sweeps and vanishes again into electronic noise before they can build a solution from it. They fire R-73 infrared missiles into the bearing anyway. The seekers come alive, searching for a heat source in the sky ahead. They find nothing. The AN/ASQ-239 had cataloged the R-73 seeker emission frequencies from the moment those missiles were illuminated on the Phantom wing stations. The response was not broad-spectrum jamming. That is a blunt instrument that wastes energy and announces itself. What the system deployed in the microseconds after missile launch was DRFM, Digital Radio Frequency Memory, and DRFM is not jamming in any conventional sense. It is deception engineered at the speed of light, and it is the single mechanism that separates an aircraft that survives this engagement from one that does not. The R-73s flew their terminal phase into empty sky. Their proximity fuses triggered on nothing. They fell. The formation Iran had assembled with 3 days of intelligence preparation, 6 aircraft, full weapons loads, and a GCI network feeding continuous targeting vectors, reduced in the space of 38 minutes of flight time and 11 minutes of active engagement to scattered individual aircraft running for Tabriz with empty rails, spent chaff cartridges, and no damage claim to justify a single sortie. This is not theoretical. The exact technology gap described in this engagement has already been demonstrated in real airspace against real Iranian F-4s. In an incident the United States military eventually confirmed on the public record. March 2013, a U.S. MQ-1 Predators operating in international airspace near the Iranian border. Two IRIA F-4E Phantoms scramble to intercept. Standard procedure. What the Iranian crews do not know, what no Iranian sensor has told them, is that two F-22 Raptors are flying escort, not positioned behind the drone, flying alongside it, undetected. Already carrying weapons-quality tracks on both Phantoms from distances the F-4 radars never measured and cannot now measure. One F-22 pilot maneuvered beneath one of the F-4s without triggering a single warning receiver. He climbed into close formation alongside the Iranian aircraft. Only at visual range, the range where physics could no longer conceal from the Phantom crew the nature of what was beside them, did he make radio contact. "You really ought to go home." The Iranian pilots broke immediately, not because they received an order to disengage, because they had just been handed the information that they had been inside a weapons envelope they never detected, for a duration they could only guess at, with no counter available to them. That is precisely the knowledge the 6 F-4 crews in this engagement receive at 28 kilometers when their radar warning receivers begin screaming from an enemy aircraft they still cannot see. They entered the fight already inside a trap. The walls were simply invisible. Now understand the mechanism that defeated those R-73 missiles. Picture a radar-guided missile accelerating toward its target at Mach 3. Its seekers transmitting pulses forward and listening for reflections. That reflection, that echo, is the only truth the missile possesses. It steers toward whatever its guidance chip designates as the strongest, most consistent return in its field of view. The DRFM captures the missile's own transmitted pulse the instant it arrives at the aircraft. Not filtered, not approximated. Digitally copied at the speed of light, with exact fidelity down to the nanosecond. The system then introduces a precisely calculated error into that copy, a time delay measured in microseconds, a phase displacement of fractions of a degree, and retransmits the modified signal back at the seeker. From the missile's perspective, it has acquired its target. The return signature is real. The geometry makes sense. The guidance logic locks on. What the seeker cannot know is that the return it trusts is a forgery built entirely from its own outgoing signal, placing the target 400 meters laterally displaced from the actual aircraft. The missile steers toward a position the F-35 does not occupy. The deception updates continuously in real time as the weapon closes. The proximity fuse finds empty air. It detonates on nothing. The F-35 did not evade that missile. It made the missile evade itself, using the missile's own intelligence as the instrument of its failure. Somewhere in the aftermath of this engagement, there are 6 Iranian pilots who climbed into aircraft their father's generation flew, airframes maintained by engineers who have spent 4 decades working under sanctions, improvising components, cannibalizing hulks that could no longer fly to keep hulks that could, transmitting decades of institutional knowledge person to person, because no manufacturer support was ever coming and none was ever going to come. The F-4E was the most capable fighter in the world in 1967. The men inside it today are not flying the past because they chose it. They are flying it because the present was closed to them, by embargo, by isolation, by a procurement gap that accumulated for 40 years while the global aerospace industry moved to a generation of combat aircraft these pilots will never sit in. They are not inadequate. They executed their mission correctly. They formed the geometry, flew the vectors, found the bearing, and pressed the engagement beyond the point where rational analysis supported continuing. That is what airmen do. 6 crews climbed into the sky over Tabriz and did everything right. and they never had a chance. In this engagement, those are not contradictions. They are the same sentence. So, can 6 fighters overwhelm a single F-35? The answer is no. Not because the F-35 is a superior close-range dogfighter. Not because American pilots train with greater discipline. Because the question rests on a false premise. An ambush requires the ambushed to be unaware. The F-35's architecture, eye, ghost, long arm, makes it structurally incapable of the kind of unawareness this engagement requires. It saw the formation assembling before the aircraft left the shelter. It held weapons-quality firing solutions before the first APQ-120 completed a single antenna sweep. It defeated the missiles before any Iranian pilot fully understood that weapons had been fired at him from an aircraft his radar had never found. 6 F-4s brought attrition logic to this fight. Mass, volume, saturation. The belief that enough aircraft aimed at one target produces an inescapable geometry. The F-35 brought a different arithmetic entirely, the arithmetic of information dominance, where the decisive variable is not how many aircraft you send, but the distance between where you can kill and where you can be killed. That distance, in this engagement, was never closed. The number that decided this fight was not 6 versus 1. It was 150 kilometers versus 0, the range at which the F-35 held weapons-quality tracks on all the 6 Phantoms before a single Iranian radar had returned a meaningful contact. If this breakdown changed how you understand what 5th-generation air dominance actually means, not just low observability in isolation, but the complete information architecture that makes stealth operationally lethal rather than merely invisible, hit subscribe. Not for the algorithm. So that the next time someone argues that numbers alone determine an air battle, you have the physics to show them exactly why they are wrong. Here is the question I want to leave with you. Iran is now reportedly integrating Chinese real-time targeting data into its ground-based air defense network, the same sensor feed that redefined the carrier calculus in the Strait of Hormuz. Does a ground-based intelligence layer that solves the detection problem change the math for an F-35 operating in Iranian airspace? Or does the same information asymmetry hold regardless of what is broadcasting from the ground? Tell me what you think below.